Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sam from Forefront Events. Thank you for joining us here today. Last time I looked at the delegate list, we've got about 100 people scheduled to be logging in throughout the panel this morning. So hopefully everyone, use this opportunity to get some good questions in. Just for those who haven't used Livestorm before, I'll just kind of give you a quick run through of how the platform works, just in case so you can make sure we get sort of full use of it. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see an option to type in questions. Please feel free. We want to make this panel as interactive as possible. So type in your questions, any challenges you're facing within your organization, please put the questions in, and then our moderator will then get that to the panel. With the questions, if, for example, there's a question that somebody else has asked that you think is a really good question, you want that to get asked sort of early in proceedings, just give that question a thumbs up. That will put the question to the top of the list, and then we can get that kind of question in as soon as possible. We've also put a poll. There's a second tab on the right-hand side where polls are, just to understand some of your challenges you faced during the past sort of couple of months with remote working. Again, that will give us a good indication of, it will help the sort of panelists know where you're at, and hopefully they can kind of use some of those answers to sort of when they're kind of explaining their own situation. So without further ado, I'll just pass across to George from Sumo Logic, who will be our moderator for today.
Great, thanks, Sam. And I'm already obsessed with the poll. Holy smokes, I knew I was going to do that. We'll get back to that in a second, though, because first and foremost, thank you. Good morning, good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I'd love to introduce our three esteemed colleagues here that have joined the call. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Greg, and then let's work our way to Edwin and Jadee to introduce themselves as well as their company and what their functions are.
Oh, great. Thanks very much. I'm Greg Steele. I'm CIO at Xinja Bank. Xinja's a neobank, a startup running out of Sydney. We've been running for a couple of years now. We got our license last year, and we've been bringing to market some savings accounts and transaction account products and debit cards, that type of stuff, and working on lending. Working on a bunch of basic banking capabilities, but also plenty of more stuff, new stuff. We're built entirely in the cloud. We're quite a modernized architecture. We made a choice to be a startup, to leave behind all of the legacy of existing systems. So it's been quite a journey, quite a challenging thing to be a startup at all. People have been involved in startups, but also very, very challenging to build a bank as a startup. I'm actually an architect. I've been an architect working in banking for a long, long time. I'm currently CIO of Xinja. I led Xinja through its build up to this point. I've been CIO for about a year now. So I can probably answer pretty much any questions across the board about technology. Yeah. Thanks.
Love it. Edwin?
Hi, everyone. My name is Edwin Kwan, and I look after the application security at Tyro Payments. So Tyro is an acquiring provider in Australia. So we started, I think the business started about 15 years ago, and this was in response to the RBA, Reserve Bank of Australia, had a call to action. They said that there was not enough competition in the payment space. So Tyro came along, we were a startup, and we tried to get into this business. And about 5 years ago, we were told that the special ADI license that we had, it wasn't going to get renewed. And to continue operating, we either had to piggyback off one of the other banks' ADI license or become a bank ourselves. So we started this journey from just doing card processing to becoming a bank. And being a bank, we had to obviously do deposits and lending, similar to what Xinja did, but we're targeted towards merchants. And we had to uplift our security posture along the way because we have a much larger attack surface area. So we've got our license about maybe 5 years ago now. Yeah, that's it for me.
That's great. Thank you so much, Edwin, and welcome, Jadee.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jadee Hanson. I'm the CIO and CISO of Code42. Code42 is a software development company. We are based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. What we do is we deliver an agent for companies' security teams that monitors all file activity, endpoint cloud throughout its lifecycle, and alerts security teams to any potential data loss issues. We're very focused on Insider threat, think it's a big issue right now, and trying to provide a new kind of more innovative way for companies to tackle insider threats.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jadee, and welcome. And I'm George Gerchow, Chief Security Officer with Sumo Logic, and we are a company that provides continuous intelligence through analytics. Again, like many of you, 100% in the cloud, born in the cloud. It's really around 3 use cases. The first one is development. So from cradle to code, making sure that we delivered it properly to our end users, as well as IT operations. And then obviously security is a big part of that as well too. So being able to provide SIM type functionality to our end users out there. So without any further ado, and without me obsessing too much on this poll, which I have live here, it's so interesting to watch these numbers go up and down. Let's get to some questions for our panelists. And so, having 3 technology leaders, across the globe, which is awesome, to be able to have people from the US as well as from the deep South. You all have a wealth of experience. To set the scene and hear about your individual company experiences with COVID-19. I mean, just looking at this poll, you can see a lot of people are kind of torn between remote collaboration, keeping a healthy culture across the organization. But it'd be nice to hear from each one of you what some of the key pieces of the puzzle were when you had to get in place a remote workforce. I know here in the US and for us, it was rather disruptive. It was like, God, are we going to do this? Are we not going to do this? And then boom, one day here we went, and for us it's been on 10, 11 weeks. And so let's go ahead and start with you, Greg, and give us your thoughts around what you had to do to be able to initiate this.
Yeah, sure. Probably, like everyone, a tough journey. We started out, because we started out as an entirely paperless organization, and all of our systems are software as a service systems. Almost everything we do is accessed through the browser. It gave us a real head start because we'd already built ourselves entirely in such a way that we did not depend on the office. We don't depend on the office network. Our office network really just gives us access to the internet. So, but things moved very quickly. We hadn't, we decided, okay, let's do a test. Let's have half of the business work from home for a day and see how that goes. It went really well, which was good because from the next week, we were all out. We were all out of the office and all working from home. Lots and lots of learning. So lots of challenges. Firstly, that communication and collaboration problem. And you probably, everyone will say the same thing. The first couple of weeks were a case of just a massive, massive dose of over-communication. Email and Slack and Zoom were just, you felt like if you didn't spend your entire day watching Slack, you were going to miss something really important. Email inboxes got completely out of control. So just massive over-communication, which was great. We also had a couple of channels for jokes and laughs and showing what you're doing in your remote office, pictures of your pets, all of that stuff. Great. That, after about a month, really started to wind down, and people then more as they needed to. So after really 2 months of it now, I think this is week 10 for us of working from home. We're just starting to look at getting back into the office next week. But we a really good cadence. We set up a meeting rhythm, so stand-ups in the morning across our teams. So it's about half an hour of ducking between about 3 or 4 different meetings, and exec level meetings. So you get that roll call, you get that engagement people, you get everyone's awake, on board. You know when someone's sick or someone's down or someone's got problems. Then productivity is low during the day. All your meetings being through Zoom, there's plenty of people you don't talk to, you don't have the opportunity to bump into. So lots of conversations don't happen. Lots of conversations are difficult to have over Zoom or over email. And we're really looking forward to getting to the office to get that collaboration and productivity up.
Makes sense. And Edwin, from more of the application side of the house, what have you seen with your teams and the cause and effect around that? And then any kind of security concerns too?
So I guess for us, in terms of application security, we've been pretty lucky because in the last few years on this journey to increase our security posture, we have done a lot of effort to automate security, build it into the pipeline. We've created, risk profiles for applications, and we set criteria. So there wasn't a lot of interaction, like human interaction required from the security team to the developers as much. So I think our impact was very low, but it was because of what we were doing in there. So teams were able to just very quickly, they had the tools to quickly self-assess to know what kind of vulnerabilities there are in the system, what we expect from them. And the only thing that we did struggle a little bit was we would normally be running threat modeling sessions with teams physically and on a whiteboard session. So that was a little bit of a tweaking around to try and see how can we get a collaborative workspace, like a little whiteboard that you could actually have the kind of communication in there. So we tried multiple things. I can't say that we figured it out just yet. We're still trying. So we tried like Zoom whiteboard. We tried using Confluence and all. We're still learning to get better at that, but we're definitely learning from each particular engagement in there. And the same for our security penetration testing. So not having the team next to us to ask questions straight away is making it a little bit challenging. And what we have done to address that is we've actually created a specific Slack channel for every engagement that we do. And we ask the representatives or the technical leads from the particular team for the application that we're testing again to be in that room so we could have this quick catch up with them. And we would organize sessions, like a video conferencing session to actually catch up with them. But apart from those things, the rest of it is all just pretty automated, all pretty built in. Security is built into our infrastructure, so we're secure by default. The easiest path is a secure path to do anything that's going to be, I guess, opening us out to bigger threats requires additional steps for those to just stop and think about it before they actually apply those things in there. So we've been pretty lucky.
Easiest path is a secure path. I love it. It's a great transition over into you, Jadee. And we've been at this for a while, and you and I speak quite a bit. What have been some things that have been challenging that are still challenging now? You would think, even as I know, Greg mentioned that we're talking about reentry quite a bit. But what are some of the challenges that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I've had kind of the similar experience to Greg and Edwin on, we were built in the cloud. All of our technology is SaaS-based applications. And so, we're really fortunate in that regard. We have very few need to jump on a VPN and go back to our office. So, a majority of our teams were set up to run remote right from the beginning. You're gonna find this funny, but one of our biggest challenges is people wanting to take their entire desk and all their chairs home with them. And so, I have IT as well. And so just from an asset tracking of like, where are all the desks and where are all the monitors? And now, people want ergonomic chairs to support them. And so honestly, I mean, that has been like a little bit of a challenge to make sure we have assets tracked. But from an application standpoint and having the tools and technology that the teams needed, we've been very fortunate.
Yeah, that's great. It's so funny because I do think even as we're talking about reentry and then some people who aren't comfortable coming back, I think those questions are going to still arise. Can I get my chair from my office? I need 3 monitors and all those different types of things. So interesting perspective for sure. And Edwin made a funny point about whiteboarding. I actually watched our chief architect, Stefan, on a call yesterday, do a really quick whiteboard on Zoom of what our architecture looked like. Because again, we're 100% SaaS based as well too, which is fit nicely for us. The only thing that we've ever had a VPN in for is our engineers accessing AWS. That's been a little bit of a challenge, especially from India, because of the way that, the circuits work out there and everything else. We actually had to change our hops from Singapore to Malaysia and try to make it better, which helped out some, but still isn't, in full effect. And then Jira too, because we have an instance of Jira on-premise, which is in AWS too. And so those are just minor challenges we've had. I think, the idea of being SaaS, and the fact that we're a SaaS offering ourselves really has changed the way that people view cloud a little bit quicker. And we'll talk about this a bit more, but I think companies that were going through a digital journey, the 4 of us are kind of lucky because we were already there. But other companies that were facing that are really struggling. They're like, how do I manage my data center now? And, how do I roll out infrastructure? And how do I keep everyone safe? And so I think it is definitely a good vantage point, even as Greg said, too, to be built on modern day architecture with microservices backing that up. So moving on to the next question, so Xinja, you guys are a very exciting company. You're transforming financial services. And from a platform point of view, has this experience changed your thinking as far as building and rebuilding modern enterprises? And what core areas have you guys been focusing on being productive throughout this new challenging time?
Yeah. Well, I just first correct you from what you said before. I don't think it's a matter of luck that we're in a better position to deal with the current pandemic, given our modern landscapes. And I know plenty of people out there don't have the modern landscapes and are dealing with data centers. And I've been embedded in those companies. I've worked in those companies. I've had fruitless efforts to try and evolve out of legacy systems and traditional systems into the cloud. Had limited success. Put massive amounts of energy and effort into it. I've had more success starting a new enterprise that is born in the cloud. So I'd say no, it's not a matter of luck. It's a matter of imperative, and the agility that it's given us, being out of the data center and out of the office, has allowed us to survive. We may not have survived this otherwise, right? Some of the constraints this would have put on us as a business if we'd been locked into the office, not just from a difficulty of operating, but from a difficulty of convincing a regulator and our customers that we have our risks well enough managed and under control. So, not luck. I think this is really solidified for us that the risks that we've taken as an organisation by leaving the legacy and the opportunities to reuse legacy behind, to go it as a startup, have to a large extent been confirmed through what we've seen. Your second part about the specific areas we've concentrated on addressed, a lot of that's been our ability to operate. So to keep our customer-facing staff, our reporting, our regulators, and our interactions with our regulators running along, right? And keep them going uninterrupted and unimpeded. And in fact, in a lot of ways enhanced. We have some of our customer support staff, we call them our Xinjarati. Some of them have actually found the experience better because they got better internet at home than they have in the office. So things work a bit more smoothly for them. It's really interesting. So keeping them working first, then keeping our delivery program working. We've got always a great imperative to deliver and bring new stuff, get stuff working, bring new stuff to market. Keeping that whole delivery machine working, that's a real challenge, right? There's a lot of interactions with a lot of staff, a lot of third parties, a lot of partners. It's probably taken everyone a little while to get good at that. I think having been through this experience should help us actually in an ongoing form to just be better at dealing with remoteness.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And then, Edwin, kind of shifting over to you a bit, focusing on application security for Tyro, so what are you guys doing now as far as continuing that automation of your CI/CD pipeline? Are there any very recent learnings that you've had that may have affected that? I know you sort of went through the fact that you guys have security baked in, which is awesome. We kind of live by that principle as well too. But is there something that during this time or coming out of this time you think that other people can benefit from as far as that automation is concerned?
So we've spent a lot of time, I guess, the last 5 years, just focusing a lot in terms of how do we protect our systems. How do we discover some vulnerabilities in the open source components that we're using or in the code quality that we're writing. So we spent a lot of time at that. And I would like to say that we're doing a pretty good job in detecting those things and addressing those things. Where we're shifting our focus now on is more in terms of the monitoring and detecting for malicious activities on our system itself. So we have at Tyro like a you build it, you write model where the development teams that actually write the application are also responsible for, I guess, keeping it running. So we also have, I guess, our own incident response team. But one of the challenges that we have with applications is that the incident response team don't really know what bad looks like. Like what is supposed to be good behavior on those applications and what are bad. So this is where we're trying to get into a little bit more, because the developers are the people who know the applications intimately. They know what's really good. What we're trying to do is we're trying to take the outcomes from the threat modeling engagements and let's try and address every single finding from the threat modeling engagement, and whatever we don't get a chance to address, or we don't think is high enough risk to address, what are some of these indicator compromise that we can actually start monitoring in our system? So we're trying to spend a little bit more time in that space. We've started doing some drills within our systems itself just to see how we respond to it. We're building our playbooks up. We're, I guess, doing kind of like game days, but it's a little bit like game days, a little bit like rate teaming, just to try and get the teams used to it. It's like a fire drill. The more you practice, the better you get at it. So that's kind of where we're focusing our efforts into a little bit. And organizing these game days remotely is going to be a challenge. We haven't run one yet, but we're going to do one soon. And it'll be interesting to see how we actually coordinate this remotely.
Yeah, that's awesome. At our next conference for Sumo Logic Illuminate, we're going to run a capture the flag, and we'll have 3 internal teams. Customers are invited as well too, prospects, and so it would be really cool to have you guys participate in that as well too, because I think the idea of gamification when it comes to threat modeling and just looking at different things like capture the flag and how that can work with some different challenges really makes people better, right? You can't get enough practice. So JD, kind of switching focus on you. So, your company obviously focuses, and thank you, we use your product. You guys focus quite heavily on insider threat. Have you seen any changes now with people now all of a sudden work from home, remote? Is the insider threat landscape going up? Is it going down? Is it staying the same? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, good question. So I think the risk on insider threat is for sure going up. So whether or not, when we think about like employee behavior, when people are all in an office, the controls that security teams don't really change, whether you're sitting in an office or you're at home. We still have an agent monitoring your endpoint. But I think people feel more accountable and they feel more watched when they're sitting in an office. When they're at home, they feel less watched and they feel more hidden, their actions more hidden. And so I certainly think like risks with that go up. I also think that, people are just trying really hard to get their jobs done. And whether that's, downloading different software or moving files to different locations, really, they're just trying to get their job done as quickly as possible without kind of people to ask questions to super easily or bounce ideas off of, which puts a lot of data at risk. And so we're sort of seeing in our customers' environments a lot more insider risk from the work from home. The other aspect of it that we've sort of seen is there's a lot more people that are anxious about their jobs. And so, that causes a lot of risk as well, where people are nervous if they're going to have a job in the next month or 2 months. And so they're starting to pull their data together to move out of the company assets, off of the company assets, and potentially use in a different role. And so those two things, I think, are certainly playing into just a higher risk of an insider and malicious insider action.
Yeah, it makes sense. And Edwin, I guess kind of shifting that over to you, are you seeing your development crew starting to use systems for more personal stuff as well as professional stuff, or how are you guys handling that? Because we're sort of facing that too, where people are now at home, and so they're starting to mix worlds a little bit. Or are you seeing that chance?
Not that I'm aware of, because I'm in application security, but what I have noticed is that people are working longer hours. So I think the workday starts at about 7 because you don't have to commute, and it ends about 7 too. So we are noticing that, and I guess that's the blur between home and work is there. So there isn't, and I won't be surprised if people are also using stuff for personal stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. Greg, what about you? Are you starting to see any of that as well?
Yeah, well, we've got a total BYOD policy, so everyone's laptop is their own for starters. And then we put our layers of mobile device management on top of that. So all of our monitoring and data loss protection mechanisms are based on the assumption that the person's bringing their own device. So the remote working doesn't cause any change to that. It's necessary to have policies you can push out to those devices that will lock the screens, force strong passwords. We have You have to have the ability to monitor traffic to some extent, to be able to have malware protection to some extent. That doesn't really change at all. Of course, that doesn't work for everybody. So we also have a very capable virtual desktop infrastructure. We use AWS workspaces for that. So all you really need on your own machine is an internet connection and the VPN client. And through there we can impose all the same controls. So you got a couple of different ways that you can access all of your stuff. Didn't make a big difference to us having people at the office or at home with that. I think that's really key. We often toy with the idea of maybe life would be easier if we just had corporate laptops and controlled the physical device. We've decided not to do that. Life is it's difficult to run a BYOD effectively. But when you actually embrace the reality of the problem and embrace the need for a zero trust environment, embrace the need to protect that data regardless of which device it's on, you can get it right.
Yeah, definitely, totally agree. And I think zero trust is becoming a reality. I think also a nugget in there too is VDI is making a huge return.
Yeah.
And so those things matter. And then like all of you mentioned, SaaS-based apps. Yeah. If I'm trying to, for example, log, data that's taking place out there and I'm driving it back into a data center, that's extremely hard to do. So let's switch focus just a little bit because I want to talk about a couple more things. I want to go off script a little bit. So I'm looking at this poll, and the two things that are really standing out here are number one, remote collaboration. And then the second one, keeping a healthy culture across the organization. And we'll attack that one towards the end when we start talking about reentry. So let's talk about remote collaboration. So, and then we'll hit up the question that's in the panel as well too. So when it comes to things like DevOps, DevSecOps, how do we keep this collaboration going? So what are some of the things we can do? I know that reentry is top of mind for everyone. Greg, you mentioned next week. I know for us, Sumos who are on the call, you're getting a preview, or we're targeting July, so that's fresh news, for reentry. But in the meantime, let's assume two things. One, we're going to continue to work from home for a while because not everyone's going to return in the same way. And collaboration's not going to look the same way, So all of a sudden, if Greg, you and I are sitting 6 feet apart with mask on, Pepsi glass between us, can't sit in a conference room anymore together, what does collaboration look like now? How can we keep people productive? And then again, in the next normal, when we do start doing reentry.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be a Pepsi can. It'll be a bloody kombucha or something like that. We're Xinja, right? We're all pink. We should. Yeah. So, look, I think the key for us with collaboration is small teams, great people, focused teams. And I think small teams can actually still collaborate okay. Slack's a great tool for collaboration. Getting good at Slack has been one of the challenges for us. And we've gotten good at that. Sorry if you got a bit of background noise. I've got someone blowing leaves. So the small teams, the great people we've got, we think has retained a pretty good degree of collaboration. The real difficulty is just being able to go and have that 1 or 2 minute conversation with someone to make sure that something that's going on either people are aware of. So that really quick cross-pollination of organisation you have through the broader teams. We find stand-ups work pretty well, have been working pretty well remotely.
Right.
Yeah. So that's worked okay, particularly where you're not relying on a wall. On a wall makes obviously very hard, but Trello's great. All sorts of things are great. Letting teams use what works well for them. I think letting each team find their way of working through those sort of collaboration things. So the main productivity loss we have when it comes to collaboration is just those brief conversations, or the ones that you're putting off until you bump into someone and then you'll talk about that thing that's going on, and just not having that, like, shit, I haven't talked to that person for 2 weeks. It can easily happen. That's the real pain. Again, I think small size helps us a lot. That happens less. I think the bigger an organization you are, it could probably be really bad.
Edwin, what do you think? Like, how can we continue to make sure that we collaborate, whether there's a mixture of reentry, work from home, What do you see happening?
So Tyro is quite interesting too. I think it's very similar to Xinja. We have a very interrupt culture at work. So we all like everyone can just approach anybody, ask any questions and all. And that's the thing that we're kind of missing with the remote working from home. What I have noticed is we're having a lot more conversations on Slack. We're treating Slack not as like a synchronous thing where if I respond, you need to respond straight away. Like it's more asynchronous. I'll send something. I wouldn't just type hi. I'll be more verbose. I write everything I need in there, and I would expect you to maybe get back to me in an hour or two. So we've been seeing those kind of communication happening. We're still doing a lot of stand-ups. We're doing it by Zoom. So we have our daily stand-ups that we get together, and rather than huddling over a board, we now use Jira or we use like a Trello board, just trying to organize ourselves. When we take on a new task, it's just communication on Slack. And what we also have done is we've created side channels rather than using like the main team one, just for specific topics in there. So you can actually, you don't have to flow through all the different conversations just to focus on what you're interested in. So we started doing that. Every team has a support channel. So you can go to that instead of walking up to a team and just speaking to someone who's sitting there. You now go to the support channel. So we kind of have like an interrupt roster going on at Tyro, where every week it's someone's job to actually be on interrupt. And we've also started seeing FAQ pages starting popping up on Confluence, where instead of asking a question on the Slack channel, you go to the FAQ first, and you see if that question has already been answered somewhere else before you ask someone in there. So those conversations are taking a little bit longer because it's not like a quick walk up and interrupt someone, but they are still happening in different forms. And I expect to see that happening as we return to work, because it's going to be a staggered thing, like where not everyone's going to be returning to the office straight away. So you're going to still have some people who are in the office and some who are not back in the office yet. So this will probably still continue for a while.
Yeah, agreed. And we're going to get to the questions that are coming into the chat here in a second. But Jadee, I definitely want to get your thoughts around this as well too, because I think you guys have focused quite a bit on collaboration, and you wear dual hats, being a CIO and a CISO. So how do you see teams, not just now in full work from home, but once we start doing re-entry collaborating?
Yeah, we've taken similar approaches to the ones that I've said. So heavy Slack users, lots of stand-ups. From the exec level, we've made a really focused point to meet with our teams pretty regularly. Our CEO is doing half-hour all-company meetings pretty regularly, just to make sure that we're constantly communicating direction, focus, and priorities. The one thing that we've done a little bit different than a lot of people that I've chatted with is the collaboration that we had. We are all in the office, or most of us working in the office, was fantastic. The collaboration that we have when we're all at home is actually working fantastic. What we want to avoid is a disruption and kind of unnecessary cycles with a middle ground. So we know that we can't all go back to exactly how we were pre-COVID. And so, trying to figure out like when is the right time where we do bring people back into the office, we want to get that timing as close to the pre-COVID experience as we can. And so we are very much slow rolling the bringing people back into the office, just because we know that it's going to be disruptive to how we've worked and how we've collaborated if we try to do a little bit of a middle ground. I was talking with our CTO last week, and we were talking about, our Scrum teams, and if, 2 people are in the office and 2 people are not on the office, and we can't use any of their conference rooms, you basically have 2 people on Zoom calls sitting 6 feet apart, talking really loud, and you have 2 people at home on the same call, and all of it just doesn't sound like it's going to work quite well for us yet. And so we've kind of made the decision to take it slow. We don't want to disrupt the collaboration that we've built. And so how do we do the return back to the office in a way where we don't disrupt that?
I think that's totally fair. And we're going to get to re-entry here in a second, but let's start knocking down some of these questions. One of them that came in, and this is a good question that I've been asked a ton, which is around, the idea of snooping on or monitoring employees for productivity. I'm going to go first on this one because this is really close to home. Absolutely not. I think that you push back. If whenever, and I know there's Sumos on the call and you need to hear this. I feel like if a manager wants us to snoop on employees for productivity, and then the manager is not that strong. We have OKRs. We have goals that we've set as teams. That doesn't change. It doesn't matter where Edwin sits, Greg sits, Jadee. You measure people with communication and goals, and those goals have got to be clearly defined. You obviously have to reorient as a manager, as a leader in the company to remove blockers to those goals if they're working from home or anything else. But the minute you start monitoring people for productivity purposes, you've lost trust. It's over, but there's a limit to that. Now, granted, if there's suspicious activity taking place or if there's a reason for you to start digging a little bit deeper, like I see comments here around Netscope and everything else, which we use, Netscope for some different things within our organization, some visibility. And then obviously we use Code 42 as well too. But the minute you start crossing that line and being intrusive, you now have privacy regulations, whether it's GDPR, CCPA, Australian Privacy Act. That's just a big can of worms that you don't want to open. So we'll quickly go through that because there's other questions too. But anyone else feel differently about that, or am I completely off kilter here?
So I 100% agree with you. We have an agent that sits on millions of endpoints and it watches file movement. And so we've been asked and approached by customers like, can you build in productivity sensors? And that's one thing where we're like, that is not at all what we're about. And that is not how you manage a team. We very much want to show security teams like risk to data loss, but we absolutely don't want to tell you when someone is working and when they're not. I 100% agree. It has to be tied to goals and deliverables and everything else that is important and measurable, not the time that you're sitting on your computer. And I think too, if there's ever a time where we should stay away from that, it's right now. We're in a situation where, gosh, like we have to be so empathetic to like what our teams are going through and how they're juggling their day to get their deliverables done. I'm at home working with my husband and my 3 kids who are also in distance learning. And I don't work my normal, 7 to 5. Like I'm taking time off in the middle of the day and I'm catching up later. And, so to monitor productivity is just so unempathetic thing to do in the current state all the time, but absolutely in the current state. Like we have to be more accommodating to the teams and how they work and let them get their job done, let them complete their goals. But monitoring time that they're at their machine seems very, very wrong right now.
Agreed. So let's shift. Another question here that George, I like his name, George T asked here. So any tips on how to get started with DevSecOps and what are the key steps? And I think, Edwin, I'll go first, and then it'd be good to hear your answer because this has always been like between security and development. There's always been a little bit of a rub, and especially when you first kick off a company because developers rule the roost, right? They're the ones standing up the workloads in the cloud. They're the ones that are in charge. If you think of an SRE team in particular, SRE site reliability engineers, they're responsible for 1/3 of the CIA triad, which is availability. And so getting that mindset going for me anyway is baking security in from day one. If you provide those guardrails, if you make it seamless for an engineer to really be able to pick up on those good habits and build it into the DNA of the company, or even like if you're an established company and you want to launch DevSecOps, you look for greenfield type projects to start integrating this into their way of thinking, and then it spreads like wildfire. But that's sort of what we had to do, was bake it into the DNA of our engineering team, work very closely with them, adopt their processes. So scrums, Greg had mentioned scrums earlier. We do scrums ourselves and sit in with our engineers in that way. And so those are some of the tips and tricks that we use. But Edwin, I would love to hear from you as well too around how to start launching DevSecOps steps.
Yeah, so we focus on 3 things. So I guess there's security awareness, and then there's tooling and processes. So awareness is really important. What we found when we started on this journey was that developers generally want to do the right thing. They believe that security is important, but what's different is that their understanding of what security is, or they think they're doing the right thing. So the first thing is just awareness in terms of highlighting the issues they were finding. So when we started this journey, we actually did some assessments on our systems, and I did this presentation. I think it was called How to Hack Tyro, like it was 2015. And I just demonstrated all the findings that we just put together. Obviously, we've already addressed them by then. And it just made them realize that, hey, oh yeah, these are actually real issues. And we also did awareness also for the product teams, because I guess the delivery schedule is driven by product itself. And what we found was that when we did a lot of security awareness in terms of just understanding what security and how to identify security, we realized that teams wanted to do security, but they didn't have enough time. They were being pushed to deliver quickly, and they couldn't see what the value was in terms of doing security. So it was just selling the value in terms of how does the security help you with I guess doing security help you with what you're trying to achieve. So that was the first bit. It was all about awareness, just awareness about why it's important, awareness about the vulnerabilities that we're seeing in Tyro. We did a Tyro's top 10, we started with OWASP top 10, and then we moved on to Tyro's top 10. And every year we have a new set of things that we're seeing in Tyro, and we try to retrain people on those things. And the next thing is just the tooling itself, having the tooling embedded into your CI/CD, and not just that, making it available for the developers to run it themselves before they make those changes into the CI/CD pipeline. So it's quick feedback, low false positives was very important, because it was all about self-serve, automated. We didn't want to be breaking security builds based on security that were false positives. We've learned very quickly, you got 3 chances to get it right. First time, they just kind of shake their head, they're going, all right. The second time, they're still a bit pissed off. The third time, they would bypass your security tooling if you don't get it right. And the last one is just processes in there. So like I mentioned that we have everything secure by default. If you make a change, you have to get a pull request, or you have to do a peer review. That's part of the process. There's no other way around it. So we made security in there such that is part of the process. So it's the main 3 things, I guess: awareness, tooling, embedding tooling into your CI/CD pipeline, and just the processes itself.
Love that. So the Tyro top 10 is a cool idea, because I get tired of looking at the OWASP top 10 and seeing the same damn things year after year after year. Thank you for that. So Greg, really quickly, we're going to shift a little bit into reentry. So one of the things that comes up on this poll, actually 26%, is keeping a healthy culture across the organization. So you guys are planning reentry. How are you dealing with anxiety and emotion? Because our roles have changed. All of our roles have changed, because now we're dealing with more of the people aspect than ever. So what are some of your thoughts around reentry and the health of the culture and organization?
Yeah, and things have changed over the last 10 weeks since we moved out of the office. People's expectations about sharing things, sharing desks, sharing space have changed. We've got a number of people who started. I think someone asked a question there about, what about someone who started work with your company during isolation and hasn't actually met anybody yet? We're thinking of having a little room for them, and we'll do a bit of exposure therapy. We'll let them out a little bit at a time to acclimatise. But it's been tough. I think we've made sure those people have had a lot of interactions with the broader group to make sure they don't feel isolated from people, as well as the physical isolation. So probably it's a lot about getting people to understand there are new rules now. Rules about the sanitisation rules, the distancing rules, and they're going to apply to all of us under all circumstances, and that's going to change the way we work. We may not be able to fit everyone in the office all the time. So on one hand, there's some people who are desperate to get back to the office, either because they just can't work at home, or whatever their personal needs or rhythms are, mean they need to be in the office a little more than some others. There's people who are pretty comfortable either way, and there's the other end of the spectrum where there's genuine anxiety, and that's real, and it's quite understandable, where people have had a lot of information overload for so long. It's still the first 5 pages of the newspaper about the virus, so that creates a lot of anxiety. There's going to need to be a little bit of encouragement and help for people and some expectations. We know we need to get back to the office to get our productivity up for our company to survive and thrive. So we're going to have to work through that anxiety. I don't think we'll have a situation where we'll say, yeah, let's just keep this remote and office-based mix large forever. We want to get back to the office, and we know that that gives us benefits as an organisation. So it's going to have to happen somewhat gradually. Although nothing's changing gradually at the moment, is it? Every week there's new rules, new directives, and we go with them. So it's a lot more confusing than the just let's clear out of the office and get to home was. Getting it right is I think going to take a little bit of just as much trial and error. So every day we'll talk about it and say what's working, what's not working, and we'll change things up and we'll be prepared to adapt.
Cool. Thank you so much. I think, Sam, that we're starting to hit on time, so I didn't know if we wanted to address any more questions or if we want to take those offline and answer them for the folks that are typing in here. But let me just say this before I hand it over to you, Sam. Like, great job, panelists. Lots of great, different viewpoints. Really appreciate your time here today, and the audience as well. All the interaction via chat. I could sit here and type back all night. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Big thank you for everyone for taking the time. Yeah, what we'll do is we'll be sending a link to showing the video from today to all the delegates. So if there's any questions that come in that didn't get answered, we can always sort of forward you on to the panel and get any sort of feedback from there. But yeah, no, big thank you again to George, to Edwin, to Jadee, and to Greg. Thank you everyone for joining, and yeah, look forward to seeing you at another one of these hopefully fairly soon. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.
Okay.